Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Now, Iran says US bases and aircraft carriers in the Gulf region are within striking range of its missiles. In an interview, the Revolutionary Guard's Air Force head, Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, said Iran is ready for a full-fledged war. Hajizadeh said after a US drone shot down its assets in Qatar, Iranian missiles have been targeting the UAE and the Sea of Oman. He added that Iran would have hit those targets if Washington had shown a reaction after the incident. Meanwhile, Iran has dismissed US accusations that it was behind drone attacks on Saudi oil installations. Earlier, the US blamed Iran for leading attacks on Saudi oil plants that have cut the kingdom's output in half. Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi said Washington is seeking excuses to attack Tehran. He said such blind accusations and remarks are incomprehensible and meaningless. Meanwhile, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said having failed at maximum pressure, the US is now turning to maximum deceit. He said the US and its allies are stuck in Yemen because of the illusion that they can win a war by weapon superiority. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Tehran is behind nearly 100 attacks on Saudi Arabia. Pompeo said Iran has launched an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply.
Iran destabilizes this entire region. It supports proxy militias and terrorist groups. It is an arms dealer to the Houthi rebels in Yemen.
Saudi shares have plummeted 3% at the start of trading today. The market slump, of course, came after drone strikes claimed by the Houthis hit the kingdom's major oil facilities. The Arab world's largest capital market shed over 200 points in the first few minutes after the opening bell. The stocks recovered somewhat from the first session losses later on. The key energy sector plunged over 4.5%, while the telecom and banking sectors each slid 3%. Moving on, New Delhi has arrested and exiled over 4,500 locals from Indian-occupied Kashmir over the past month. Srinagar police say the arrested Kashmiris have been moved to jails in different states of India. The occupied Valley's Shopian district tops the list with over 40 civilians detained under the controversial Indian public safety law. The people of occupied Kashmir have been looking for their missing relatives who've been detained since the 5th of August. Meanwhile, Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai has called upon the UN to work for peace in the occupied territory. The activist said stability in the valley will allow children to go back to their schools and resume their education. New Delhi's curfew in Indian-occupied Kashmir has entered its 42nd day. In the United States, Sikhs and Muslims in Houston have staged a truck rally against India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir. The protesters condemned gross human rights violations by Indian forces in the occupied valley. The rally moved through the roads and streets with trucks decorated with flags and protest signs against Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They announced more protests ahead of Modi's visit to the US on the 22nd of September. In Afghanistan, the government and US airstrikes have killed 40 Taliban members in the country's northern and western provinces. The Afghan Defense Ministry said 2 senior Taliban commanders, including the shadow governor for the northern Samangan province, were among those killed. But the Taliban have denied the killing of the governor. Security officials said more operations will be launched against both the Taliban and ISIS to prevent attacks ahead of the presidential polls on the 28th of September. Fighting picked up in Afghanistan after US President Donald Trump cancelled peace talks with the Taliban last week. Afghanistan's former Prime Minister Gulbuddin Hekmatyar says Afghan forces believe the conflict in the country is a holy war. He said youngsters are joining the fighting due to economic constraints and poverty. Speaking in Kabul, the former politician said over 300 Afghan national defense and security members are killed every day. He said the current Kabul government is the biggest hurdle to peace, as it is happy in the continuation of war. Calling on the Taliban, he said the group should continue talks with the Afghans after the failure of their dialogue with the US. Meanwhile, presidential spokesman Sadiq Siddiqui has asked Hekmatyar to apologize to the Afghan forces for his remarks. The Taliban have revoked their ban on the International Committee of the Red Cross in Afghanistan. The group imposed a ban on the ICRC in April over alleged suspicious activities during vaccination campaigns. The Taliban said they will provide security to Red Cross staff doing humanitarian work in areas under their control. The group's spokesman, Zabiullah Mujahid, in a statement, said all of their fighters will pave the way for ICRC activities. The Taliban had also imposed a ban on the World Health Organization, but the spokesman did not refer to the WHO in his statement. 12 people have died after a tourist boat capsized in the Godavari River in southeastern state of Andhra Pradesh in India. Rescue officials say 63 passengers were aboard the ship. 40 of them are still missing. The state's chief minister announced compensation of 1 million rupees to the families of the deceased. The Godavari River has been overflowing for 1 week. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has condemned the mobile phone ban in Rohingya camps by Bangladesh. The UN body said the Rohingya should not be subjected to any restrictions which stop them from contacting their relatives. In a statement, the UNHCR said Dhaka is responsible for ensuring the security and safety of Rohingya refugees. UNCHR spokesperson Andrej Mahesic said security measures should not impact refugees' access to basic services and rights. Rejecting the statement, Dhaka said there are no restrictions as refugees can contact their relatives whenever they want. Fresh clashes between pro-democracy protesters and the police have erupted in Hong Kong City near the Parliament. Tens of thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators threw bricks and petrol bombs at the police. To contain the situation, the police fired water cannons and tear gas to disperse the protesters. One water cannon caught fire after being hit by a petrol bomb. Earlier clashes between rival protesters turned violent. Pro-democracy demonstrators gathered outside the British consulate, waved Union Jack flags and demanded the UK support. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has pledged to bypass parliamentary legislation ruling out a no-deal Brexit. Johnson likened Britain to the Incredible Hulk as it seeks to break free from the EU. Johnson said the UK will break out of the EU's manacles like the green-skinned superhero. He drew parallels between the UK situation in Brexit talks and the frustration felt by the fictional scientist Bruce Banner. Johnson has maintained he wants to negotiate a new deal with the EU that does not involve a backstop. Meanwhile, Brexit Minister Stephen Barclay says the UK is moving towards a deal, though significant work remains to be done. In an interview, Barclay said he is scheduled to meet EU negotiator Michel Barnier on Monday. In another development, ex-Tory Minister Sam Gyimah has switched to the pro-EU Liberal Democrat Party. Now, Turkey's defense ministry says the delivery of a second Russian S-400 missile defense system battery has been completed. The newly delivered systems will become active in April next year. The defense ministry said efforts to mount the systems and train personnel who will use them are underway. The initial parts of the system were delivered to Ankara in July. Ankara and Washington have been at loggerheads over Turkey's purchase of the S-400 systems. The US said the systems are not compatible with NATO defenses and pose a threat to Lockheed Martin's F-35 stealth fighter jets. The US has also expelled Turkey from its F-35 program. However, Ankara has dismissed Washington's warnings so far. And with that, we're going to take a break, but don't go anywhere. More stories to follow. Welcome back. The Syrian government has opened a new checkpoint in the Idlib de-escalation zone to ensure humanitarian aid and a safe exit for civilians. Russian army official Alexei Bakin said militants from the zone can also lay down arms there. Bakin said the Abu al-Dahur checkpoint and corridor will provide medical treatment and vehicles to civilians leaving Idlib. He said a group of militants is still violating the ceasefire as 34 cases of shelling were recorded in Aleppo and Idlib in the past 2 days. Meanwhile, the Syrian state media reported militants are stopping civilians from leaving through the Abu al-Dahur checkpoint. Palestine's Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki says the Muslim world must push the international community to resolve the Israel-Palestine conflict as per UN resolutions. He was addressing a meeting of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in Jeddah over Israel's plans to annex areas of the occupied West Bank. Maliki said the Israeli Prime Minister's plan was part of a series of provocative threats. PM Benjamin Netanyahu said he would annex the Jordan Valley and other illegal settlements if he wins re-elections next week. Middle Eastern and EU countries expressed alarm at Israel's intentions. Arab foreign ministers also condemned the plan as an act of aggression. They said it would undermine any chances of a peace settlement with Palestine. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu's caretaker government held a meeting in the Jordan Valley approving his proposal. The Jordan Valley is part of the occupied West Bank that Israel captured in the 1967 war. Tunisia is holding its second presidential poll since the 2011 uprising that toppled ex-president Ben Ali and sparked the Arab Spring. 26 candidates, including the current prime minister and a former president, are fighting for the top office. The death of President Beji Caid Essebsi in July forced the elections to be held 3 months earlier than scheduled. The public has been deeply invested in the electoral campaign. Tunisia is the only democracy to emerge from the 2011 Arab Spring, but the North African state is plagued by economic stagnation, security threats, and political instability. A runoff vote will be held in November if nobody secures an absolute majority in today's elections. Italy has allowed the rescue ship Ocean Viking, which is carrying 82 migrants, to disembark at Lampedusa. The move is hailed as a reversal of the previous administration's uncompromising closed-door policy. The vessel picked up the migrants off Libya and had asked both Italy and Malta for permission to dock. Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio said the French ship was allowed to port only after European countries agreed to take in migrants. Earlier, German Interior Minister Horst Seehofer said Berlin will take in a quarter of migrants who arrive in Italy by boat. EU states will meet in Malta on 23rd September to discuss the migration issue. According to the UN, around 850 migrants have died at sea in 2019 so far. At least 9 people have been killed after a bus collided with a truck in Russia's Yaroslav region. The local healthcare department said 28 others were injured in the accident. The department said 9 ambulance crews are working at the scene. The traffic police said the accident occurred because of a truck driving into the oncoming lane. The Interior Ministry has launched a criminal investigation. Russia's first floating nuclear power plant has arrived to its permanent base near an isolated town across the Bering Strait from Alaska. Russian state nuclear energy company Rosatom says it aims to make the floating station operational by the end of this year. This facility will replace an aging nuclear power plant in the Chukotka region. Rosatom says it plans to launch more seaborne power units. It says such arrangements can help the environment by reducing greenhouse gas emissions causing global warming. West African leaders have pledged $1 billion to combat the rising threats of terrorism in the region. At a regional summit in Burkina Faso, the bloc said Al-Qaeda and ISIS-backed groups have strengthened their foothold across the Sahel region. The Economic Community of West African States said the militants have fueled local ethnic violence, especially in Mali and Burkina Faso. ECOWAS President Mahamadou Issoufou said the rising violence has displaced 3 million people this year alone. He also called on the UN to strengthen its peacekeeping mission in Africa.
The international community has the duty to participate in the battle to safeguard peace and security.
Meanwhile, in Congo, police have arrested former Health Minister Oli Ilunga over the alleged embezzlement of funds for fighting the ongoing Ebola epidemic. Police say he tried to flee the country to avoid legal action. Ilunga oversaw Congo's handling of Ebola for nearly a year before he was fired from the post in July this year. The police said Ilunga will be presented before a prosecutor on the 16th of September. Ilunga's lawyers have denied he planned to flee the country and has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Forensic scientists in Mexico have identified 44 bodies buried in a well in the state of Jalisco. The remains were discovered after local residents complained of a foul odor coming from the well. The human remains were hidden in 119 black bags. A local organization has appealed to the government to send more specialists to assist with the identification process. They say the local forensic department does not have the necessary skills to complete the operation. In Denmark, people have donated over $2.5 million in the world's first ever climate telethon. The Danes came together to raise money for planting 1 million trees in the Scandinavian country. The fundraising event was described as the first of its kind to focus on climate. For every donation of $3, 1 tree will be planted. 20% of the funds raised will go to forest conservation efforts in Denmark and abroad. The plantation drive seeks to reduce the escalating concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Singapore's air quality has deteriorated to unhealthy levels for the first time in 3 years. The haze threatens to exacerbate a regional dispute over forest fires. The National Environment Agency says the pollutant standards index went beyond the 100 mark. A reading above 100 is considered unhealthy. The environment watchdog said winds were blowing the smog from forest fires in Sumatra towards Singapore. The air quality also dropped to unhealthy levels in and around Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. This weekend, British model Naomi Campbell led a catwalk show for a charity group, Fashion for Relief. This year's show was arranged to raise funds for children's education and skills development causes. Let's take a look.
Charity galas and concerts have been all the rage in recent years. Celebrities get together for an eventful evening and the raised proceeds all go towards a special cause. The same positive vibes and energy was felt at Naomi Campbell's fashion show this weekend. During the show at the British Museum, models strutted in an array of colorful and quirky outfits from a mix of designers.
It's unbelievable. It's the example and the personification of people using their platforms and using their powers for good.
The catwalk included floor-length gowns, such as one sequined dress with feathered sleeves worn by Campbell. There were also deconstructed jackets and plenty of prints, including one top depicting a portrait of supermodel Kate Moss. The collection was showcased at one of the most revered London Fashion Week, where British designer Molly Goddard's Walking Eve collection was very well received by attendees. The Fashion Week has brought an array of color, energy, and famous people to one of the fashion capitals of the world.
You see what people like this bring out. You bring out lots of photographers, lots of media, and we can use our voices for something more than just medial things. You know, fashion is, yeah, you get dressed up or whatever, but it does change people's lives, and it can change people's lives. And I think that's why this event is so successful. It's been successful for a very long time.
London Fashion Week is a 7-day event of celebrating colors, palettes, and silhouettes and will end on September 17th.
And on that note, let's take another break, but don't go anywhere. Sports and weather to follow. Well, it's 31 degrees Celsius here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. And that was all I have from the Bulletin at the moment, but do stay tuned to Indus News for further updates. And as always, thanks for watching.